You ever look around and just feel, well, like you're juggling way too many things?
Uh-huh.
Maybe it's a to-do list that just never seems to end, or, a closet full of stuff you bought just in case.
Or that feeling that you should be more organized somehow.
Exactly. Yeah, feeling overwhelmed is pretty common these days, right? So much information, so many demands.
And it's interesting because those feelings, like the urge to buy more stuff or finding it hard to get started on tasks, they often aren't just random. They can tie back to some really basic things about how our minds work.
Right. And that's what we're really digging into today. We've gathered, well, a whole bunch of interesting sources for you.
Yeah, things like articles on the psychology behind why we buy things.
Details on something called executive function, how we regulate ourselves, habit formation,
Even some maybe surprising insights from teacher productivity strategies.
and a self-assessment questionnaire too, which might just, shed some light on your own patterns.
Yeah, our goal in this deep dive is really to connect those dots between, say, procrastination, that impulse buying, and those everyday struggles with organizing things or just getting stuff done.
We want to explore how these things might relate to your brain's own management system, what experts call executive function and self-regulation.
Hopefully giving you some clear insights into what might be going on for you.
Okay, so let's jump right in. One of the first things that really popped out from the sources was this idea about buying too much stuff.
Mm.
It seems it's often driven more by a feeling of uncertainty about the present or the future, rather than actually needing the thing.
That's a really key point from that Zen Habits article.
Hmm.
It suggests that this underlying feeling of unease, it can actually trigger the urge to acquire things, almost like a way to feel more secure.
Yeah, totally. Think about it, right? You feel a bit anxious about a trip coming up, and suddenly you're convinced you need 5 new travel
Or
gadgets.
nervous about a work presentation, so maybe a new outfit feels like the answer.
Exactly. Or even just planning a dinner party can lead to buying tons of extra stuff, trying to make sure it all goes perfectly, control the outcome.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Buying becomes this strategy we use to try and manage those uncomfortable feelings, the nervousness, the anxiety.
Like we're trying to buy a sense of control when things feel kind of shaky.
But the thing is, as the article points out, that sense of security you get from buying, it's usually pretty temporary.
Right, it doesn't last.
The underlying uncertainty doesn't really vanish,
Yeah.
and that can just make you want to buy even more stuff later.
So it's like a Band-Aid, basically. Doesn't fix the actual issue.
Exactly. And the article suggests a really interesting alternative. Instead of just automatically reaching for your wallet when that urge hits,
Yeah.
try to notice the uncertainty that's actually driving it.
Okay, so how does that work practically?
Well, the idea is to pause. When you feel that urge to buy something you maybe don't really need, ask yourself, okay, what am I feeling uncertain about right now? And then instead of immediately buying the thing, just sit with that feeling for a moment.
Just notice it.
Yeah.
Without acting on it.
Yeah. It's about developing a different response. Instead of trying to fix the feeling by buying, you just acknowledge it. Notice how it feels. Realize it's just a sensation, not something you have to escape immediately.
Okay, so doing that practice could actually help weaken that constant urge to buy.
That's the idea. It helps break the automatic link between feeling uncertain and needing to acquire something.
Okay, so we're seeing how our emotions, specifically uncertainty, can be a really big driver behind, well, our buying habits.
Definitely.
Now, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about how our brains manage all of this. We kept seeing this train come up. Executive function. What is that in simple terms?
Right. So think of executive function as like your brain's CEO, or maybe it's air traffic controller.
Or the CEO. I like that.
It's the set of mental skills that help you organize your thoughts, your actions, prioritize tasks, manage your time, make decisions, basically steer yourself towards your goals.
So it's conducting the whole orchestra, making sure everything works together.
That's a great analogy, yeah. Now, when these CEO-like skills aren't working as efficiently as they could be, that's what we call executive dysfunction.
Right.
And while it's a really core feature of ADHD, it's super important to know that you can experience executive dysfunction without having ADHD.
That seems like a really crucial distinction to make. So if it's not ADHD, what else could cause executive dysfunction?
Well, our sources point to a few things. It could be genetics, running in the family,
Okay.
or damage to the prefrontal cortex, that's the front part of the brain that handles these jobs,
Uh-huh.
exposure to certain substances, experiencing significant trauma, or even situations involving neglect can also play a role.
Yeah.
It's often a pretty complex mix of factors.
Okay. And what are the main jobs executive function helps us with? Like, what might be affected if someone's having challenges there?
There are several key areas. First, there's activation, just getting started on tasks. That can be a big hurdle.
Yeah, I can see that.
Then focus, being able to pay attention, stay on track. Effort is another one, maintaining motivation, processing things smoothly.
Hmm.
Emotion regulation is huge. Managing frustration, keeping feelings in check, working memory that's holding and juggling information in your mind. And finally, action, regulating your physical activity and impulses.
Wow, okay. That covers a lot of ground. So, if any of those areas are a struggle, it could definitely make everyday life feel much harder.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And these executive functions, they're really the foundation for self-regulation.
Self-regulations.
Yeah. Our sources highlighted, I think it was 7 key aspects of self-regulation that rely heavily on good executive function.
Like what?
Things like self-awareness, knowing yourself,
Yeah.
self-restraint, resisting impulses,
Mm-hmm.
using visual and verbal info in your mind that's nonverbal and verbal working memory,
Okay.
managing your emotions effectively, keeping yourself motivated, and being able to plan things out and solve problems.
Got it. So if someone is having difficulties in these executive function or self-regulation areas, what might that look like day to day? What are some common signs?
Well, one really common one is often called time blindness.
Time blindness.
Yeah, that feeling like you just can't accurately guess how long tasks will take or maybe how much time has even passed.
Ah, okay. I think I know that feeling.
Right. Also, difficulty sticking with long-term goals, trouble organizing things, your space, your schedule challenges, keeping emotions in check, or maybe finding it hard to process information quickly. Those can all be signs.
And it's interesting that these aren't skills we're just, born with fully developed. They take time.
That's exactly right. Executive functions start developing really early, around age 2, but they typically aren't fully mature until we're maybe 30 years old.
Wow, 30.
Yeah. And for individuals with ADHD, this development process can be delayed, which helps explain some of the challenges they might find with things like impulse control or planning ahead.
Our sources also mention specific brain circuits involved.
Yes, in the prefrontal cortex, that front part, again, there are roughly 4 main networks that are really important for this.
Okay.
There's the what network, crucial for working memory holding and using information. The when network helps organize things in time, like sequencing.
Mm-hmm.
The why network is involved in managing emotions. And the how network relates to self-awareness.
So disruptions in those networks could affect memory, planning, emotions, even social stuff.
Exactly. And you can see pretty clearly how weaknesses here, especially with organizing and planning, could directly lead to, well, procrastination and feeling disorganized.
Yeah, definitely. If you struggle to break down a big project or even figure out where to begin, it's no wonder you might just put it off.
Precisely. When those foundational skills aren't quite as strong, the mental effort needed to start and stay on track just becomes that much higher.
Now, this feels really important to stress, something our sources made clear. Just because someone has some of these symptoms, maybe struggles with executive function, it doesn't automatically mean they have ADHD. Oh, absolutely. That's such a critical point. And it really highlights why getting an accurate diagnosis is so important.
Because other things can look similar.
Exactly. Our sources detailed several environmental factors that can actually lead to things like inattention, restlessness, hyperactivity. Think about big life changes, moving house, parents divorcing, financial stress.
Okay.
Those can all have a huge impact. Even things like inconsistent discipline at home or experiencing bullying can show up in ways that might resemble ADHD symptoms.
What about sleep? That came up too. The impact of not getting enough sleep seems huge.
Oh, profound. Seriously. Lack of sleep can cause so many issues that directly mimic ADHD symptoms: hyperactivity, irritability, slower reaction times, trouble learning, just generally lower performance. And it's also important to consider if there's an underlying medical reason for poor sleep, like sleep apnea.
Right. It was also pretty eye-opening to see the list of mental health conditions that can present with symptoms looking like ADHD. Yeah, it's quite a list. Anxiety can manifest as restlessness, poor concentration. Depression often involves lack of focus, forgetfulness, low motivation.
Okay.
Even things like bipolar disorder, with its high energy and impulsivity, or OCD, where focus issues can arise from being over-focused on certain things.
Hmm.
Substance misuse, autism, glandic disorders, they can all have overlapping symptoms.
It really drives home how complex diagnosis must be. You have to look at the whole picture.
Absolutely. And it's not just mental health. Learning difficulties can play a role too.
How so?
Well, if someone has a specific learning disability, it can directly affect their attention, how they process information, their organization.
Right.
And interestingly, even students who are maybe gifted but are bored or are not challenged in school might start showing inattentive behaviors. It's about the fit sometimes.
And finally, there were even physical health conditions mentioned.
Yes, a range of things. Seizures, thyroid issues, allergies, anemia, even ear infections or certain medications can potentially cause attention or hyperactivity issues.
Wow, so it really underlines the need to rule out all these other possibilities.
Definitely. Getting the right assessment, understanding the actual root cause is just so crucial for making sure people get the right kind of support.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground: uncertainty driving overbuying, the role of executive function, other conditions that can look similar. How does this all kind of connect and interplay?
It's like a web, really.
Yeah.
Think back to that feeling of uncertainty we started with, the one that can trigger buying.
Yeah.
Well, that same uncertainty can be a major source of anxiety. And as we just discussed, anxiety itself can show up with ADHD-like symptoms.
Okay.
Or if you already have an underlying executive function challenges, anxiety can definitely make those worse.
That makes total sense. Feeling anxious and struggling to focus or organize, that sounds like a really tough cycle.
Precisely. And flip it around, if you have weaker executive function skills, it can be harder to manage your emotions effectively, right? So that might lead to more frustration, more impulsivity, which again can look similar to symptoms seen in conditions that mimic ADHD.
And the difficulty organizing tasks, that executive function piece, seems like a straight line to feeling overwhelmed.
Absolutely.
And we know feeling overwhelmed is a huge reason people procrastinate.
Exactly. And then add in poor time management, another executive function aspect that can lead to more stress, more anxiety,
Which feeds back into the uncertainty.
which might lead back to coping by buying things or avoiding tasks through procrastination. It's all very interconnected.
Okay, so we've definitely outlined some of the challenges here. Now, the important part: what can we actually do about it? What strategies did the sources suggest for improving things, building better habits?
Well, going back to that Zen habits piece, that simple practice, just noticing the uncertainty and sitting with it for a beat instead of immediately buying something. That's a really powerful first step for breaking the impulsive buying cycle.
Just that moment of awareness.
Yeah. And then for executive dysfunction specifically.
What helps there?
Well, first off, getting a proper evaluation is key, just to understand what you're working with.
Right.
Beyond that, making changes to your environment can be incredibly helpful. Practical things, using lists, setting timers, using visual aids, basically, getting information out of your head and into the external world so you don't have to rely solely on working memory.
Externalizing it. Okay.
Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, can also be very effective.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember these skills can develop and strengthen over time. It takes practice, but improvement is possible.
Okay. And procrastination. That's such a common struggle. What did the sources say about tackling that?
The article on procrastination really framed it as often being about prioritizing short-term mood repair. Basically, avoiding feeling bad now, even if it causes problems later.
Avoiding the discomfort.
Exactly. And it listed a whole bunch of reasons why we do it. The task might just feel unpleasant, or maybe we feel anxious or overwhelmed by it. Perhaps perfectionism gets in the way. Or we feel disconnected from our future self, who has to deal with the consequences. Low motivation, expecting it to be really hard, abstract goals. Yeah. Lots of reasons.
Yeah, that covers a lot of possibilities. So what are some concrete things we can actually do to stop procrastinating?
Okay, so the article offered a ton of practical techniques, really valuable stuff like setting very specific and realistic goals.
Yeah, just get project done.
Right, much more specific.
Yeah.
And breaking those big goals down into really small, manageable steps, tiny steps.
Yeah.
Committing to just that first tiny step can make a huge difference in getting momentum going. Also, giving yourself permission to not be perfect, trying to make the task itself less awful, maybe more enjoyable if possible.
Yeah.
Reducing distractions is huge, obviously. Trying to delay that impulse to just switch to something easier. Setting deadlines for yourself. Planning ahead for obstacles like what might trip you up.
Anticipating problems.
It's exactly. Addressing the underlying fears or anxieties. Finding ways to boost your motivation or energy. Improving your workspace. Using social accountability or time management tricks like the Pomodoro technique.
Okay.
Creating starting rituals.
Hmm.
Sometimes starting with the easiest part helps, sometimes the hardest, whatever works for you.
Yeah.
And really importantly, building self-efficacy, that belief you can do it, and self-compassion. And of course, treating any underlying conditions.
That's a really comprehensive list. Lots to try there.
Definitely.
Now, building new habits is often part of this. What did the source on habit formation say about why habits sometimes, well, just don't stick?
Yeah, that Reddit thread on habits was interesting. It pointed out some common pitfalls, like trying to change too many things all at once.
Guilty.
Right. Or having really vague goals for the habit, like exercise more, or not having strong enough reasons why you actually want the habit, not setting aside a specific time for it, and just misunderstanding how habits actually form in the brain.
Okay, so what's the better way? How do you build habits that do stick?
Well, the advice was, start ridiculously small. Make the initial habit almost too easy to fail at.
Like floss one tooth?
Kind of, yeah. Be super precise about what the habit actually is. Really dig deep and find strong personal reasons why you want this. The tip was write down like 10 or 20 reasons.
Wow.
You dedicate a specific time, maybe link it to something you already do every day, like right after brushing your teeth. And crucially, understand that habits get wired in through positive reinforcement. So find ways to make the habit itself, or the immediate reward, feel good. Associate it with pleasure.
Make it rewarding somehow. Got it. Self-regulation keeps coming up as this foundational skill. Can you elaborate on what that is and why it's so critical?
Sure. Self-regulation basically is your ability to manage your thoughts and feelings so you can act in ways that help you reach your goals.
Okay.
It's absolutely fundamental for, well, pretty much everything: well-being, mental health, success in school, work, relationships. It's huge.
And it develops over time, especially during adolescence.
Absolutely. That's a key period. During the teen years, the brain's reward and emotion centers develop faster than the parts responsible for cognitive control, for that self-management.
Ah, so that explains some things.
Right. Which is why support for developing self-regulation is so important for teens and young adults. Caregivers, mentors, they play a vital role, providing stable relationships, structure, helping kids learn to manage emotions, co-regulating with them.
And some people might need more support than others.
Definitely. Things like individual personality traits, adverse childhood experiences, or ongoing chronic stress can all increase the need for extra support in building these skills.
And stress impacts this.
Yeah, prolonged stress can actually negatively affect how the brain develops, including the parts needed for self-regulation.
So what helps?
Well, the good news is that these skills can be taught intentionally. Things like persisting through difficulty, problem solving, delaying gratification, setting goals, making decisions, managing stress and emotions, knowing when and how to ask for help. Teaching these skills directly, alongside that supportive caregiver relationship, can make a real difference.
That's hopeful. Now, switching slightly, we also looked at teacher productivity and organizational systems. How do those ideas apply to, us regular folks?
The core idea from that Busy Miss BB article is super relevant. It's about having clear, repeatable systems for common tasks.
Systems. Okay.
Yeah, like a step-by-step procedure you always follow. Whether you're a teacher handling paperwork or you're managing your own life admin, these systems basically automate routine stuff.
So you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time.
Exactly. It frees up mental energy. You're not constantly deciding, okay, what do I do with this email? Where does this bill go? It reduces that feeling of being overwhelmed.
So just like a teacher might have a system for grading or organizing supplies.
You can create your own systems for handling mail, organizing digital files with a consistent naming convention, processing email delete, file, reply, whatever your system is. Having defined systems saves time and mental effort.
Yeah.
The article even suggested developing an end-of-day routine to kind of close things out and prep for the next day.
Yeah.
That can really cut down on stress.
A shutdown routine. I like that.
Yeah.
Finally, we had the executive function questionnaire for adults. How can our listener use this? It's not for diagnosis, right?
Correct. Definitely not a diagnostic tool on its own. But it's really valuable as a starting point for self-reflection.
How so?
It can help you pinpoint areas where your executive function skills might be stronger and where you might face more challenges. It just raises awareness. If you see a consistent pattern of difficulty in certain areas, it might highlight something worth exploring further, maybe with a professional.
And what sort of areas does it cover?
It's pretty comprehensive. It asked about things like initiation, how easily you start tasks; completion, how well you finish them; execution, how you actually do the tasks; distractibility, perseverance and focus; general inattentiveness; memory.
Okay.
Also, your perception and management of time, planning for the future. Organization skills, physical activity levels, how you handle frustration and impulsivity, anxiety, multitasking, even sleep patterns.
And the key is to answer honestly about how things are without your usual coping strategies.
Exactly. It's trying to get a sense of your underlying tendencies. Yeah, those images that came with it were helpful too. The one with the head divided into segments: goals, planning, prioritizing, reflection, flexibility, organizing.
Yeah.
And that list of the 5 core skills: paying attention, organizing planning, initiating staying focused, regulating emotions, and self-monitoring just helps visualize the different components.
And the air traffic controller analogy.
Right. Comparing working memory, cognitive flexibility, or inhibitory control to managing planes. It's a good way to grasp these complex mental processes.
So reflecting on those questions can give our listener some valuable personal insights into their own executive function profile.
Precisely. It's a tool for increasing that self-awareness, which can then guide how you approach some of the strategies we've talked about.
Okay. So wrapping up this deep dive, we've really journeyed through quite a bit. How uncertainty can fuel overbuying.
The absolute centrality of executive function for getting organized and getting things done.
All those other conditions that can sometimes mask or worsen these challenges.
The psychology behind why we procrastinate and how habits actually form.
The importance of self-regulation as this foundational skill.
And the practical power of using systems for productivity.
And the big takeaway seems to be how interconnected all of this really is.
Absolutely. And hopefully, understanding these dynamics can empower you, the listener, to start making some more mindful, positive changes.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. Just take a moment. Which of these ideas we discussed today really struck a chord with you? What's maybe one small, actionable step you could take, even today?
Yeah, maybe it's just noticing that urge to buy something unnecessary, or breaking down one task that feels huge into a tiny first step.
Or maybe identifying one small habit you want to build and deciding exactly when and where you'll do it. Just start exploring these things with a bit more awareness, a bit more control.
Perhaps take another look at that self-assessment questionnaire, or pick one anti-procrastination technique that sounded promising. That first small step toward understanding yourself better and building more effective habits, it really can make a difference.